Captain Jake Hunter was cleaning his rifle when the message came through. The war against the alien forces had been going on for 3 years now, and he was tired. Really tired. His unit had been fighting on the front lines of the Centauri system. For months without a break, the communication officer walked over to him with a serious look on his face. "Captain, you have an urgent message from Earth's command. It's marked as personal and confidential." Jake took the small device and activated it. The holographic image of a lawyer appeared in front of him. The man wore expensive clothes and had the kind of face that delivered bad news for a living. "Captain Hunter, I regret to inform you that your uncle, Admiral Robert Hunter, died in a shuttle accident near Proxima Station last week. According to his will, you are his sole heir. You need to come to his estate on Kepler 4 for it to be as soon as possible to handle the inheritance." Jake stared at the message for a long moment. Uncle Robert. He hadn't spoken to the man in over 10 years. They had a big fight when Jake joined the military as a regular soldier instead of going to the academy like Robert wanted. After that, Robert stopped talking to the family entirely. Jake requested emergency leave and caught the next transport. To Kepler 4 to be. The planet was beautiful, covered in purple grass and 2 bright suns in the sky. Robert's estate sat on a hill overlooking a crystal-clear lake. The house was huge, made of white stone with tall windows and gardens everywhere. When Jake walked up to the front door, it opened automatically. A soft female voice spoke from hidden. "Speakers welcome, Captain Hunter. I am Arya, the estate's artificial intelligence system. I've been waiting for you." Jake stepped inside. The house was even more impressive on the inside. Marble floors, expensive furniture, and artwork from dozens of different worlds. His uncle had definitely been rich. "Arya, can you show me around? I need to understand what I've inherited here." "Of course, Captain. But first, there is something important you need to know. Your uncle left you more than just property and money." Jake followed Arya's voice through the house. They passed a library, a dining room big enough for 50 people, and several sitting rooms. Finally, they reached a door that required a handprint. "To open, Captain. What you are about to see may shock you. Your uncle was involved in activities that were legal but morally questionable." The door opened, and Jake stepped into a large common area. Soft music played in the background, and comfortable chairs were arranged around the room. But what caught his attention were the women. 17 women from different alien species sat around the room. Some were reading, others were talking quietly, and a few were working on what looked like art projects. They all looked up when Jake entered, and he saw fear in their eyes. One woman stood up. She was tall and strong-looking, with silver skin and bright golden eyes. Her hair was white as snow, and she moved like a trained warrior. "So, you're Robert's nephew?" she said. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the challenge in it. "Kestra, I speak for the others here." Jake looked around the room, confused. "I don't understand. What's going on here?" Arya's voice filled the room. "Captain, these women are bound by legal contracts that your uncle acquired over the years. According to galactic law, these contracts are valid and transferable to blood relatives. You now own them." Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "Own them? What do you mean own them?" Blue-skinned woman with large, sad eyes spoke up. "We are bound to serve whoever holds our contracts. Your uncle bought us from various sources across the galaxy. Some of us were sold to pay debts. Others were captured during raids. We cannot leave unless the contract holder releases us." Jake looked at each face in the room. He saw intelligence, sadness, and resignation. These weren't objects or property. They were people, thinking and feeling beings who had been trapped in a system that treated them like things to be bought and sold. "This is insane," Jake said. "How is this legal?" Kestra stepped closer to him. "Because the galaxy is full of wars and chaos. When people are desperate, they sign contracts they don't understand. When worlds are conquered, the survivors become property. Your uncle was very good at finding opportunities in other people's suffering." Jake sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "Arya, show me these contracts." Holographic documents appeared in the air around him. Page after page of legal language, signatures, and official seals. Jake had seen military contracts before, but these were different. They were designed to trap people forever. Contracts are ironclad, Arya explained. They can only be broken under very specific circumstances. Death of the contract holder, voluntary release, or legal challenge in the Galactic Court of Justice. Jake looked up at Kestra. What was my uncle like? How did he treat you? Kestra's jaw tightened. He was cruel. He enjoyed having power over us. He made us wear uniforms and serve as guests at parties. He liked to remind us that we belonged. To him, another woman, this one with green skin and beautiful features, spoke up. He never physically harmed us, but he enjoyed our fear. He would threaten to sell us to worse masters if we didn't obey perfectly. Jake felt sick. His uncle had been a monster, and now everyone expected him to be the same. I need some time to think, Jake said. Arya, can you show me to a room where I can be alone? Of course, Captain. First, you should know that you have responsibilities now. The women need food, shelter, and medical care. The estate requires maintenance. There are people who will be watching to see what you do. Jake spent the next 3 hours in his uncle's study, reading through files and trying to understand the full scope of what he had inherited. The women weren't just trapped by contracts. They were part of a larger system that his uncle had been involved in for decades. Robert had been a dealer in what the files called exotic personnel. He bought and sold people from across the galaxy, always staying just within the bounds of galactic law. The 17 women in the house were the ones he had kept for himself. When Jake finally came back to the common room, the women were preparing dinner. They moved quietly and efficiently, like they had done this routine thousands of times before. Don't have to do that, Jake said. I can take care of myself. Astra looked at him suspiciously. It's what we do. It's what we're for. No, Jake said firmly. You're not for anything. You're people. You have your own thoughts and feelings and dreams. The women looked at each other uncertainly. This was clearly not how they were used. To being treated, that night Jake lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He thought about the war he had been fighting, thinking he was protecting innocent people. But here in his uncle's house, he had found innocent people who needed protection from a system that his own family had helped create. He made a decision that would change everything. He was going to find a way to free all 17 women. No matter what it cost him. But first he needed to understand exactly what he was up against. The next morning, Jake called the women together. I want you to know that I'm not like my uncle. I don't want to own anyone. I'm going to find a way to free all of you. Kestra crossed her arms. Many masters have made that promise before. It's easy to say words.
No.
Then I'll have to prove it. With actions, Jake replied. But I need your help. I need to understand how this system works, so I can figure out how to break it. For the first time since Jake had arrived, he saw something other than fear in their eyes. It was small, but it was there. Hope Jake Hunter had inherited more than just money and property. He had inherited a chance to do something right in a galaxy full of wrong. The question was whether he would be strong enough to see it through. Jake spent the next morning in his uncle's office, surrounded by legal documents and old files. The more he read, the angrier he became. His uncle hadn't just bought these women randomly. He had specifically chosen them for their skills and beauty, treating them like collectible items. Arya, is there any legal way to release these contracts? Jake asked. The contracts are designed to be permanent, Captain. However, there are 3 possible ways to break them. First, voluntary release by the contract holder. Second, death of the contract holder. Third, a successful legal challenge. In the Galactic Court of Justice? Jake leaned back in his chair. What about the voluntary release? Can't I just sign papers saying they're free? It's not that simple. The contracts are connected to a network of other agreements. If you release the women, you become responsible for paying back their original purchase prices, plus interest and penalties. The total amount would be approximately 47 million credits. Jake whistled. That was more money than he would make in 10 lifetimes as a military captain. What about the legal challenge? The success rate for contract challenges in the Galactic Court is less than 3%. Most cases take years to resolve, and the legal fees are enormous. Jake rubbed his temples. Every solution seemed impossible, but he had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. He decided to start by getting to know the women better. If he was going to help them, he needed to understand their individual situations. He found Kestra in the garden, practicing combat moves with a wooden stick. Her movements were fluid and deadly, like a dancer who could kill you. "You're a warrior," Jake said. Kestra stopped and looked at him. "I was a commander in the Valkyrian Defense Force. My world was attacked by raiders. I fought until my ship was destroyed. Then I was captured." "How did you end up here?" "The raiders sold me to a slave trader. Your uncle bought me because he wanted an exotic bodyguard for his parties. He'd like to show off that he owned a Valkyrian warrior." Jake could hear the pain in her voice. "I'm sorry. That should never have happened to you." Tra studied his face. "Why do you care? You could use us the same way your uncle did. No one would stop you, because it's wrong. You're not property. You're a person with your own life and dreams." "Dreams," Kestra repeated quietly. "I used to dream of returning to my homeworld. Now I try not to dream at all. It hurts too much." Jake found Liana in the library, reading a book about quantum physics. She was one of the blue-skinned women, with large eyes that seemed to hold infinite sadness. "You're a scientist," Jake said, sitting down across from her. Liana nodded. "I was a researcher on Lyra Prime. I was working on a project to develop faster-than-light communication. My family needed money for my sister's medical treatment, so I signed a temporary work contract. But the contract had hidden clauses that made it permanent." "What happened to your sister?" "I don't know. That was 5 years ago. For all I know, she's dead." Liana's voice was barely a whisper. Jake met with each of the women over the next few days. There was Zara, the green-skinned healer, who had been captured during a raid on her peaceful world. There was Nira, a young woman who had been sold by her own parents to pay gambling debts. Each story was different, but they all ended the same. Wei trapped in his uncle's house, their lives stolen from them. By the end of the week, Jake had made a decision. He couldn't free them immediately, but he could start treating them like the intelligent, capable people they were. He called everyone together in the main hall. "I want to make some changes around here. First, you don't have to wear those uniforms anymore. Wear whatever makes you comfortable. Second, you don't have to serve me. I can cook my own meals and clean my own room." The women looked at each other uncertainly. This was completely different from what they were used to. Jake continued, "I want you to pursue your own interests. Liana, if you want to continue your research, I'll get you the equipment you need. Kestra, if you want to train, I'll set up a proper gymnasium. Everyone should have the chance to do what they love." A young woman with silver hair raised her hand. "What if we don't know what we love anymore? It's been so long since we had choices." Jake's heart broke a little. "Then we'll figure it out together. You have time now. Real time to remember who you are." Over the following weeks, the house began to change. The women started wearing their own clothes instead of uniforms. They began talking more freely, sharing stories and jokes. Liana set up a small laboratory in one of the spare rooms. Kestra began teaching some of the others self-defense techniques. Jake also started learning about the bigger picture. His uncles. Files revealed a massive network of slave trading that stretched across the galaxy. Military officers, politicians, and wealthy business people were all involved. The system was designed to be legal, but completely immoral. One evening, Jake was reading in the study when Kestra knocked on the door. "Come in," he said. She entered and sat down across from him. "The others are starting to believe you might actually help us. But I need to know something. What's in this for you? Why are you doing this?" Jake closed his book. "Honestly, first it was just because I thought it was the right thing to do. But now, after getting to know all of you, it's personal. You're not just victims to me anymore. You're friends." Kestra was quiet for a long moment. "Your uncle used to say things like that sometimes. When he wanted us to trust him before he did something cruel. I'm not my uncle. Prove it." Jake stood up and walked to his uncle's desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small device. "Controls the security system that locks the doors at night. My uncle used it to make sure none of you could escape. He handed the device to Kestra. You keep it. If you ever want to leave, you can. Kestra stared at the device in her hands. You're giving me the power to free everyone? I'm giving you the choice. That's what this is all about. Choice. You should have the right to decide your own future. That night, Jake lay in bed wondering if he had made a mistake. Would they all be gone in the morning? Part of him hoped they would be. At least then, they would be free, even if it meant he would never see them again. When he woke up, he found Kestra in the kitchen making breakfast. She looked up when he entered. We decided to stay, she said simply. Not because we have to, but because we want to. You're the first person in years who has treated us like human beings. We want to help you find a way to break these contracts properly. Jake felt a warm feeling in his chest. For the first time since arriving at the estate, he felt like he might actually succeed. Then let's get to work, he said. Arya, I need you to search for any legal experts who specialize in contract law, and see if you can find any records of successful challenges to these types of agreements. Certainly, Captain. But I should warn you, there are people who will not be happy if you succeed. Your uncle's business partners, for instance. They have a lot to lose if the system changes. Jake looked around the kitchen at the women who had become his friends. Then I guess we'd better be ready for a fight. The war was no longer just happening on distant planets. It was coming to his own home. But this time, Jake knew exactly what he was fighting for. 2 weeks after Jake gave Kestra the security device, Arya finally found what they were looking for. A lawyer named Dr. Alina Rodriguez, who specialized in galactic human rights law. She worked on a space station called Haven Point, which was known for being neutral territory. Captain Arya announced during breakfast, Dr. Rodriguez has agreed to speak with you. However, she wants to meet in person. She says these matters are too sensitive for normal communications. Jake looked around the table at the women. They had started eating breakfast together every morning, and it had become his favorite part of the day. I'll have to leave for a few days. Will you all be okay here? Kestra nodded. We've been taking care of ourselves for years. A few days won't hurt, Kesley Liana said, looking up from her tablet. I've been working on something. That might help. I've been analyzing the contract language, and I think I found some patterns that could be useful. Jake smiled. See? You're already contributing more than you know. The journey to Haven Point took 2 days. The space station was huge, with docking bays for ships from hundreds of different worlds. Jake had never seen so many different alien species in one place. Dr. Rodriguez's office was in the legal district. A maze of corridors filled with lawyers, judges, and people seeking justice. When Jake finally found the right door, he was surprised by what he saw. Dr. Rodriguez was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. Her office was cluttered with books, legal documents, and what looked like evidence from dozens of cases. Captain Hunter, she said, standing up to shake his hand. I've been expecting you. Please, sit down. We have a lot to discuss. Jake explained. The situation with the 17 women and his uncle's involvement in the slave trade. Dr. Rodriguez listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions. What you're describing is unfortunately more common than most people realize, she said when he finished. The galactic legal system has loopholes that allow this kind of exploitation to continue, but there are people fighting back. Fighting back how? Dr. Rodriguez walked to a wall safe and entered a code. A small device had activated it. Suddenly, the room was filled with a soft humming sound. Anti-surveillance shield, she explained. What I'm about to tell you is highly classified. There's an organization called the Libertas Coalition. We work to free people trapped in these contracts and to expose the system that allows it to happen. Jake leaned forward. How does it work? We have agents throughout the galaxy. Some are lawyers like me. Others are former military, computer specialists, or people who were once trapped themselves. We help people escape, provide them with new identities, and work to bring down the criminal organizations that profit from this trade. Can you help, my friends? Dr. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Yes, but it won't be easy. 17 people is a lot. To move at once. and your uncle was connected to some very powerful people. If we move against his network, they'll fight back hard. She activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots appeared on dozens of worlds. These are locations where we know slave trading is happening. Your uncle's operation was one of the biggest. His death has created a power vacuum, and other criminal groups are fighting to take control of his network. Jake studied the map. So by trying to free the women, I'm not just fighting the legal system. I'm fighting criminals too. Exactly. And there's something else you need to know. Your military service record shows you've been fighting in the Centauri War. What you probably don't know is that some of the people funding that war are the same ones who profit from the slave trade. Jake felt like he had been punched in the gut. What do you mean? Wars create refugees. Refugees become desperate. Desperate people sign contracts they don't understand or get captured and sold. The longer the war goes on, the more people become available for the trade. So the war I've been fighting is being prolonged deliberately by people who profit from the chaos it creates. Your uncle was part of that system. Jake sat back in his chair, trying to process this information. He had spent 3 years believing he was fighting for justice, only to discover that the war itself was part of an even greater injustice. What do I do now? Dr. Rodriguez smiled. You keep doing what you're doing. Treat those women with respect and dignity. But also, you help us expose the whole system. We need someone on the inside. Someone with access to your uncle's files and connections. I'm just a military captain. I don't know anything about legal battles or criminal investigations. You don't have to. We'll guide you. But first, you need to go back home and make sure those women are safe. Once word gets out that you're not playing by the old rules, people will start paying attention. Jake spent the next day learning about the Coalition's methods. They had safe houses on dozens of worlds, a network of sympathetic judges and politicians, and even some support within the military. But they also had powerful enemies. The hardest part, Dr. Rodriguez explained, is that what these people are doing is technically legal. You can't just arrest them. We have to prove that the contracts were obtained through fraud, or that the people were coerced, or that the system itself is unconstitutional. How long does that usually take? Years, sometimes decades. But in your case, we might have a shortcut. If those women are willing to testify about their experiences, and if we can prove that your uncle used fraud or coercion, we might be able to get all the contracts declared invalid at once. Jake thought about Kestra and the others. They've been through so much already. I don't want to put them through more pain. It would be their choice. But Captain, this might be the only way to not just free them, but to prevent the same thing from happening to others. On the flight back to Kepler 44-B, Jake thought about everything he had learned. The situation was more complicated than he had imagined. He wasn't just fighting to free 17 women. He was fighting against a system that had trapped thousands of people across the galaxy. When he arrived back at the estate, he found the women waiting for him in the main hall. They looked worried. We need to talk, Kestra said. While you were gone, we had some visitors. Jake's blood ran cold. What kind of visitors? 3 men in expensive suits? They said they were business partners of your uncle. They wanted to inspect the merchandise and discuss transfer arrangements. What? Did you tell them? We told them you weren't available and that they needed to make an appointment. But Jake, they weren't asking. They were threatening. They said that your uncle had agreements with them and that those agreements were still binding. Jake looked around at the faces of his friends. Saw fear there, but also determination. These women had been through hell, but they weren't going to give up without a fight. Arya, Jake said, activate all security systems. I want to know if anyone comes within a kilometer of this house. Already done, Captain. I also took the liberty of recording the conversation with the visitors. Their threats were quite specific. Jake smiled grimly. Good, Dr. Rodriguez is going to want to hear those recordings. He gathered the women around him. I met with a lawyer who specializes in these kinds of cases. There might be a way to free all of you legally, but it's going to be dangerous. There are people who will try to stop us. More dangerous than staying here as prisoners? Nira asked. Maybe I won't lie to you. If we do this, we're not just fighting for your freedom. We're fighting to expose a system that has hurt thousands of people. That makes us targets. Kestra stood up. Then we fight. We've been victims long enough. It's time to become warriors. The other women nodded in agreement. Jake felt a surge of pride and fear. He had wanted to protect them, but now he realized they didn't need protection. They needed the chance to fight for themselves. All right, Jake said. Let's bring down the whole system. Outside, storm clouds were gathering over the estate. But inside, for the first time in years, there was hope. The attack came at dawn, 3 days after Jake returned from Haven Point. Arya's alarms woke everyone in the house as armed men surrounded the estate. Jake rushed to the security center and saw 12 soldiers in black uniforms moving through. The gardens? Arya. Who are they? Jake asked, pulling on his clothes. Military police, Captain. They have orders to arrest you for desertion and theft of military property. Jake's heart sank. Someone had reported him to his commanders. The charges were obviously fake, but that didn't matter. Once they took him away, the women would be defenseless. Kestra appeared in the doorway, already dressed and carrying a weapon she had made from kitchen supplies. How many? 12 outside, probably more coming, Jake replied. They want to arrest me. Then we don't let them. Kestra's voice was calm and deadly. Jake looked at her in surprise. Kestra, these are military police. If you fight them, they'll call you terrorists. And if we don't fight them, they'll take you away and we'll be back where we started. Except this time, our new owner might be even worse than your uncle. The other women had gathered in the hallway. Liana was carrying a modified scanner that could jam electronic equipment. Zara had prepared medical supplies. Even Quiet Nira was holding a makeshift weapon. We're not running anymore, Kestra said. We're making our stand here. Jake felt a mix of pride and terror. These women had found their courage, but he didn't want them to get hurt because of his decisions. Arya, can you contact Dr. Rodriguez? Communication channels are being jammed, Captain. However, I can still access local defense systems. The house had been built by Jake's uncle to be a fortress. Hidden barriers dropped over the windows, and the doors locked automatically. But Jake knew it wouldn't hold the soldiers for long. There's another problem, Arya announced, detecting 3 more vehicles approaching from the south. These appear to be civilians, but they're heavily armed. Jake checked the monitors. The new arrivals were the same men in suits who had visited while he was away. They had brought friends, and those friends were carrying military-grade weapons. So we're fighting both the military and the criminals, Jake said. Just like old times, Kestra replied with a grim smile. The first shots came from the military. Police, they were using stun weapons, trying to capture rather than kill. But the criminals had no such restrictions. Their energy blasts shattered trees and left. Smoking craters in the ground, Jake realized that the two groups weren't working together. The military wanted to arrest him quietly, while the criminals wanted to take control of the women by force. Now they were fighting each other as much as attacking the house. This might actually work in our favor, Jake said. Arya, can you enhance the confusion? I can redirect some of their communications and make each group think the other is reinforcing. The house. For the next hour, the estate became a battleground. Jake and the women fought from inside the house, while the two attacking groups fought each other in the gardens. It was chaos, but organized chaos. Kestra proved to be a brilliant tactical leader. She positioned the women at different windows and coordinated their defense like the military commander she used to be. Liana's jamming devices disrupted the attackers' equipment. Zara kept everyone patched up when they got hurt, but Jake knew they couldn't hold out forever. The military police were calling for reinforcements, and the criminals seemed to have unlimited ammunition. That's when the real surprise came. A new ship landed behind the house, and Jake feared the worst. But the people who came out weren't wearing uniforms or suits. They were dressed like civilians, but they moved like soldiers. This is Commander Torres, a voice called out over a loudspeaker. Captain Hunter, we're here to help. Jake recognized the name Torres was his old friend from the academy, someone he had served with early in his career. But how had she found him? Arya opened a communication channel to Commander Torres. Jake, it's really you. Torres' voice came through clearly. Dr. Rodriguez contacted us. We know what's really going on here. It's coalition forces. There are more of us in the military than you might think. We've been waiting for a chance. To expose this corruption, the tide of battle shifted quickly. Torres and her team were experienced soldiers who knew how to fight smart. They disabled the criminal vehicles and surrounded the military police. Within an hour, the shooting had stopped. The criminals were either captured or had fled. The military police found themselves outnumbered and surrounded by people who outranked them. Jake stepped outside for the first time since the attack began. Torres walked up to him and shook his hand. "You've caused quite a stir," she said. "Half the military command wants you court-martialed. The other half wants to give you a medal. What happens now?" "Now we take this fight public." Dr. Rodriguez has been building a legal case, but she needed evidence. What happened here today, combined with your uncle's files, gives us everything we need. Jake looked back at the house where the women were watching from the windows. What about them? That's up to them. Dr. Rodriguez found a legal precedent that could free them all immediately, but it requires them to testify publicly about what they've experienced. That means the whole galaxy will know their stories. Jake felt his heart sink. They've been through enough. I don't want to put them through more pain. It's not your choice to make, Kestra said, walking up behind him. It's ours. Jake turned to see all 17 women standing together. They looked tired and scared, but also determined. "We've been talking," Kestra continued. "We know what testifying means. We know it will be hard. But if our stories can prevent this from happening to others, then we have to tell them." Liana stepped forward. "I've spent 5 years wondering if my sister is alive or dead. If speaking out means other families won't have to go through that uncertainty, then it's worth it." Besides, Nira added with a small smile, "We're not victims anymore. We're survivors, and survivors fight back." Torres looked impressed. "Dr. Rodriguez said you were all remarkable people." She was right. Over the next few hours, coalition technicians secured the estate and began documenting everything they found. Jake's uncle's files contained evidence of corruption that reached the highest levels of government and military command. But the biggest breakthrough came when Liana made a discovery in the computer systems. "Jake, you need to see this," she called from the office. "I found hidden files that your uncle encrypted. They contain records of every transaction, every payment, every person who was involved in this network." Jake looked at the data streaming. Across the screens, names, dates, amounts, locations. It was a complete record of the slave trade operation that had operated for decades. "This is enough to bring down the entire system," Torres said. "Once we release this information, everyone involved will know that you're the one who exposed them. You'll never be safe." Jake looked around at the women who had become his family. They had already decided to risk everything for justice. How could he do any less? "Then I guess we'd better make sure we win," he said. That night, as they prepared for the legal battle that would determine their futures, Jake found himself alone with Kestra in the garden. The attack had brought them closer together, and he realized his feelings for her had grown beyond friendship. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. Kestra looked up at the stars. "I've been ready for years. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for us." Jake took her hand. "Whatever happens, we face it together." "Together," she agreed. The war was no longer happening on distant planets. It was here, now, and the outcome would determine whether justice was possible in a galaxy that had forgotten what freedom meant. Tomorrow, they would take their fight to the highest court in the galaxy. Tonight, they had each other, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The Galactic Court of Justice was the most impressive building Jake had ever seen. Floated in space above the neutral world of Nexus Prime, a massive crystal structure that could be seen from orbit. Representatives from hundreds of worlds came here when they needed to settle disputes that affected the entire galaxy. Jake stood with the 17 women outside the main courtroom. They had spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment. Dr. Rodriguez had coached them on what to expect, but nothing could really prepare them for what was about to happen. "Remember," Dr. Rodriguez said, "tell your stories in your own words. Don't try to sound like lawyers. The judges need to hear the truth, not legal language." Kestra squeezed Jake's hand. Whatever happens in there, I want you to know that these have been the best months of my life. The first time in years, I felt like a person instead of property. El Suda, Jake looked into her golden eyes. This isn't goodbye. We're going to win this. And if we don't, then we'll find another way. I'm not giving up on any of you. The courtroom was enormous. Floating platforms for the judges and viewing areas for representatives from different worlds. News crews from across the galaxy were broadcasting the trial live. This wasn't just about 17 women anymore. It had become a symbol of something much bigger. The prosecution was led by a team of lawyers representing the corporations and individuals who profited from the slave trade. They argued that the contracts were legal and binding and that changing the law retroactively would damage the entire galactic economy. These agreements were made freely by consenting adults, the lead prosecutor argued. If we start invalidating legal contracts because we don't like the outcomes, no business agreement in the galaxy will be safe. Dr. Rodriguez stood up to respond. Your Honors, we will prove that these contracts were obtained through fraud, coercion, and deliberate exploitation of desperate people. These are not business agreements. They're human rights violations disguised as legal documents. The first witness was Liana. She walked to the center of the courtroom and her voice was transmitted. To every world in the galaxy, my name is Liana of Lyra Prime, she began. 5 years ago, I was a quantum physicist working on communication technology. My sister was dying and we needed money for her treatment. A recruiter told me I could earn enough in 1 year of contract. Work to save her life. Liana's voice grew stronger as she continued. He never told me that the contract had hidden clauses that made it permanent. He never told me I would become property. I signed that paper to save my sister's life, and I don't even know if she's still alive. One by one, each woman told her. Story Kestra spoke about being a military commander who was sold after being captured in battle. Nira talked about parents who sold her to pay gambling debts. Zara described how raiders destroyed her peaceful world and sold the survivors. The courtroom was completely silent as the women spoke. Even the prosecutors seemed affected by what they were hearing. These weren't legal abstractions anymore. Were real people with real pain. But the defense wasn't giving up. They brought in expert witnesses who argued that the contracts were technically valid. They showed documents proving that everything had been done according to galactic law. The law is the law, one expert testified. We cannot change it simply because we feel sorry for these individuals. That's when Dr. Rodriguez played her trump card. She activated a holographic display that showed Jake's uncle's encrypted files. The evidence Liana had discovered revealed years of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, Dr. Rodriguez announced, we have proof that this entire system was built on corruption. Military officers were paid to create conflicts that would generate refugees. Politicians were bribed to keep the laws favorable to slave traders. The contracts themselves were deliberately written to be impossible to understand. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing payments to military commanders, communication logs proving that wars were prolonged deliberately. Video recordings of slave traders laughing about how easy it was to trick desperate people into signing contracts they couldn't read. As the evidence was presented, Jake watched the faces of the judges. He could see their shock and anger growing. This wasn't just about contract law anymore. This was about a conspiracy that had affected millions of lives across the galaxy. The most powerful moment came when Commander Torres testified about the military's involvement. As an active duty officer, her testimony carried enormous weight. I have served in the galactic military for 15 years, she said. I believed I was fighting to protect innocent people. Now I know that some of the wars I fought were started and prolonged by people who profited from the suffering they created. The trial lasted 3 days. On the morning of the 4th day, the judges returned with their verdict. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, the chief judge announced, this court finds that the contracts in question were obtained through systematic fraud and conspiracy. We hereby declare all such contracts null and void effective. Immediately, the courtroom erupted in cheers. Jake felt Kestra collapse against him, tears streaming down her face. Around them, the other women were hugging each other and crying with relief, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court orders a full investigation into the conspiracy revealed during this trial. We are recommending criminal charges against all individuals involved in this network. Outside the courtroom, reporters surrounded them with questions. But Jake only had eyes for the women who had become his family. They were free, really free, for the first time in years. "What happens now?" Nira asked. Dr. Rodriguez smiled. "Now you get to choose your own futures. The coalition has safe houses on dozens of worlds if you want to go home. Or you can stay on Jake's estate if you prefer. The choice is entirely yours." Over the next few weeks, the women made their individual decisions. Some chose to return to their homeworlds to search for family members. Others decided to work with the coalition to help free more people trapped in similar situations. But several of them, including Kestra, chose to stay with Jake. The estate was transformed from a prison into a sanctuary, a place where people recovering from trauma could heal and plan their futures. Jake and Kestra's relationship deepened into something beautiful. Their love had grown slowly, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. There was no shadow of ownership hanging over them anymore. They were equals, choosing to be together. "Do you ever regret it?" Kestra asked one evening as they watched. The sun set over the lake. "Could have just kept things the way they were. You would have been rich and powerful." Jake put his arm around her. "I regret that it took me so long to do the right thing, but I don't regret anything that happened. After that, even the battles, even the danger, especially those, they showed me who you really are. All of you. You're the strongest people I've ever met." Kestra leaned against him. "We're strong because we had something worth fighting for. We had hope." Months later, Jake received a message from Liana. She had returned to Lyra Prime and found her sister alive and healthy. The medical treatment had worked, and she was now studying to become a doctor herself. "Thank you," Liana's message said, "for giving me the chance to find my family again. But more than that, thank you for showing me that there are still good people in the galaxy." Jake smiled and showed the message to Kestra. She was working in the garden they had planted together, growing food for the new arrivals who came to the sanctuary each week. "She's right, you know," Kestra said. "You did save us, but not in the way you think." "What do you mean?" "You didn't save us by freeing us from contracts. You saved us by treating us like people, by giving us back our dignity and our choices. That's what real freedom is." Jake looked around at the estate that had once been a symbol of oppression but was now a place of healing and hope. The Galactic War had finally ended when the conspiracy was exposed. The slave trade networks were being dismantled across hundreds of worlds. It had all started with one person deciding to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. Even when it was dangerous. "So what's next?" Jake asked. Kestra stood up and brushed the dirt from her hands. "Next, we keep building. We keep helping people. We keep choosing love over fear." Jake took her hand, and they walked back toward the house where their friends were preparing dinner. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to choose, and that made all the difference.